The Tales of Magnus and Prime. Stone Soul. Prologue. Audio by Jack Robinson. Hyrrocaul never felt safe in his own skin. Fate had woven him a faulty tapestry from birth, not a single thread stitched with grace nor love. Whatever God above had sown his seed must have been absent of care, of mind, or of both. It wasn't disdain or malice that had made him the person he was. It was neglect, and neglect stung far more than hatred. However, not one to be defeated by fate, he pushed forward in life. The gods of Prime were weak, and it was weakness that drew Hyrrocaul to them. He didn't want better fortune, he wanted a better future. Once one hard-fought victory struck him, and it rolled into the next. Eventually the ill-fated fool was seated as ambassador to the gods, or a god at least. Arch-Paladin of the Order. This was his title now, a hollow holding void of any real achievement. The Order worshipped a golden goddess of health and vitality, yet everything and everyone beneath their object of sanctity was anything but. The vital lands they protected were ravaged by corruption, both physical and political. They ruled a cancerous land, and eventually the cancer had spread to Hyrrocaul's very being. Over the months his health had slipped, and with the fall that followed came a string of horrid symptoms. His hands shook and writhed, with thick ravines of pus cutting deep to the bone. His eyes would spasm and roll back and forth at even the faintest light on the dullest of days. Worst of all was the bouts of breathlessness that gave every word he spoke a lingering wheeze. Nothing was more terrifying than the fear of each breath being his last. Death was coming, but it was what awaited him behind the veil of fatality that scared the aged Arch-Paladin. Time was fleeting for him, so fleeting that something needed to be done. Yet no one under the Order's banner sought to fight for him, save for a handful of equally ill-fated failures. One such failure was standing before him now.
"Philip,"
Hyrrocaul spoke through raspy chords,
"is it time?"
In his old age, Hyrrocaul required an assistant, a spirit of vigour that could wave away the notion that the old man was on death's door. A semblance of youth, to flavour the grey gruel of decay. The plucky boy was barely through adulthood's door, and yet he held near infinite potential. All the young ones did, but Philip was so much more. He was ambition, he was charisma, he was a little bit of an arse. Looking down at a bronze watch engraved with ancient text, Philip smirked and confirmed, "Visitation has begun, boss man." It was no secret that the boy's watch hadn't ticked a talking years, but flair meant much to the wannabe wise man. Who was Hyrrocaul to deny him a little fun?
"Good. Eyes on the exits, if you would. They will prove useful some day."
Hyrrocaul passed Philip, the spirit of vigour himself, and pressed onwards to deal with spirits of a whole other kind.
"Oh, no touching the warden's walls this time. The rumours of gold within the prison are likely just lies of the layman."
With an unassuming grin and a wink, Philip said, "Gotcha. I'll keep my beak clean." As Hyrrocaul started his pained stagger up a stretch of stairs, he heard a whisper slip from the ground level.
"One of us has to."
Dismissing the foolish boy to his hopeless pursuits, they parted ways before Hyrrocaul arrived atop the stairs and across from a whole new breed of hopeless. The type of hope extinguished unwillingly in the iron grip of justice. A corridor apart stood the two. One was the head of the Order, the other was subject to life's unending chaos. It was these dank and dreary walls that they were destined to meet. A parley had been granted by the warden of this place of peril, and all that resided within. It was a blank block of blackness, with an even blander purpose. To capture and lease the criminals of the corrupted Vitalands, Central Block it was called, one part of 3 that made up the Order's biggest prison, a fancied grave to bury the darkest minds of the land, far from the brightest eyes of the common folk. Warding over the oily dimness of Central Block was a man of little character, or none that he would allow you to glean. He was a monster of his own right, one big enough to rule over all the others. A grey face of solemn expression sat above a statuesque body, tightly squeezed into a suit that didn't quite suit him. The warden did nothing but simply gesture at the end of the corridor towards the failure who was attempting to flail about the place. A prisoner, older than most around him and longer serving than them all. He was bound to a chair of small spikes, worn from years of use, and blinded and gagged by the same length of rag, a man given less respect than an animal. Screaming through his rags, the prisoner was mumbling out a fearful cry. This was profound for most reasons, mostly due to the fact this one criminal had been mute for years, maybe decades. For a spark to ignite in him now meant a great change was coming, one sensed in the bones of a mildly maddened man.
"The mad dog barks again,"
seethed the warden in a chilling tone.
"Claims there are ghosts roaming the place. I think he's clearly gone mad. But all the rule states the Arch-Paladin must sign off on this incident. If there really is spectral pests about, we'll need to bust them. Either that, or give me the signal to put this mutt down."
Typical of the warden to treat spirits of the damned as common vermin, and to call for the death of a panicked prisoner. Stories of the warden's past with certain prisoners was well known, and this particular prisoner was special to him.
"There will be no murder today, Percival,"
ordered Heracor.
"I wish to have a moment with the prisoner. Alone."
Begrudgingly the warden let this be, and without further remark he skulked back to his office. Heracor's job was now simple: silence the prisoner's screams and listen to his words. Before the warden vanished completely, Heracor asked him one last thing.
"What is his name?" "It's Mud. That's all you need to know,"
replied the warden, as he slammed his door tightly shut. Ignoring the ignorance of the brutish response, Heracor marched forth. He passed the other high-security cells and the pair of black iron guards before the prisoner's cell. The Arch-Paladin held no fear and pressed on in confidence. The small, tight walls of the prison scraped against the top of his head as he cut a brisk pace into the cell. With a door slam of his own, he sealed off the outside world and managed to find a modicum of peace without it. Only the gentle raindrops of a spring dawn could be heard from outside. Serenity cradled the cruelty within both men and their hearts.
"Grinning ghost! Grinning ghost!"
repeated the prisoner.
"Grinning ghost!"
Placing a firm palm on the prisoner's hand, Heracor felt every bump and bruise on the man's bony flesh. Along the forearm were needle marks from failed medicinal ends to tonight's conflict. Beatings and narcotics would get them nowhere. This task required something far more gentle. Keeping a grasp on the prisoner's arm, Heracor stood over him and whispered softly into his ear.
"Good morning, Kenneth. This place may seem like hell on Magnus, but hold tight just a little longer."
The man immediately ceased his cries and snapped to attention. All fear and worry halted as a wave of realization hit him, the feeling of salvation, one that cut to his core and stretched back as far as he could remember. After the decrepit paladin removed his gag, the equally decrepit prisoner replied,
"Who are you?"
With a small smile on his sickly face, the sly arch-paladin said,
"My name is Heracor, and I'm going to set you free."
To be continued. Thank you everyone, and have a good day.